There's an experiment I want you to try. Put your phone face down, close every tab, turn off the music, and just sit. No intention, no agenda. Just you in a room with nothing to do. How long before the urge hits? For most people, it's under a minute. Some can't make it 30 seconds, not because something is wrong with them, but because something has been done to them and to all of us that we've never been fully honest about. We are living in the most noise-saturated environment in human history, and we have been conditioned, systematically, deliberately, at enormous profit to others, to feel that the quiet is the problem. It isn't, but understanding why we reach for noise the way we do, that's where something real begins to shift. Let's start with what's actually happening in your brain when you reach for stimulation. Every time you check your phone, every notification ping, every new piece of content, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, not because the content is good, because it's new. The brain's reward system doesn't evaluate quality, it responds to novelty, to the possibility of reward. It's the same mechanism that drives gambling. The slot machine doesn't pay out every time, but it might. And that uncertainty is the hook. The tech industry knows this. It's not a conspiracy, it's in their design documentation. The infinite scroll was deliberately engineered to remove the natural stopping point. The autoplay feature was built to eliminate the moment of conscious choice. The notification is timed not for your convenience, but for maximum re-engagement. You are not weak for being affected by this. You are human. And these systems were built by some of the most sophisticated behavioral scientists in the world, specifically optimized for the neurology you were born with. But here's what they didn't design, and what no algorithm can replicate. The thing that happens in your nervous system when you actually stop. When you remove external stimulation, the brain doesn't crash, it activates. There's a network of brain regions, the default mode network, that only comes fully online when you stop consuming and stop producing. When you are, in the clinical sense, doing nothing. And what happens there? Memory consolidation, emotional processing, creative integration, the kind of thinking that doesn't happen when you're focused on a task, the thinking that connects disparate things, surfaces buried insight, makes sense of experience. In other words, the most sophisticated processing your brain can do happens in the silence you keep interrupting. The noise isn't just filling time, it's replacing something. But let's go deeper than neuroscience, because the dopamine loop explains the mechanism. It doesn't explain the fear, because that's what it is, underneath the habit, fear, not of silence itself. Silence is just the absence of sound. What we're afraid of is what silence makes available. Ourselves. The unfiltered, unperformed, unoccupied version of who we are when no one, including our own busy mind, is watching. The philosopher Blaise Pascal identified this in the 17th century, centuries before smartphones, before television, before radio. He wrote that the sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he cannot stay quietly in a room. He wasn't describing distraction, he was describing avoidance of the self. What are we avoiding? Different things for different people. For some it's grief, real grief, unlived and unprocessed, that keeps getting postponed. For some, it's a question they don't want to answer honestly. Is this the life I actually want? For some, it's a feeling that has no name, just a low hum of wrongness, of something unresolved, of a gap between who they are and who they sense they could be. And noise, beautiful, endless, frictionless noise, keeps all of that just below the threshold of conscious awareness, where it can't bother you, where it can't ask anything of you, except it does bother you, it leaks. It shows up as irritability with no obvious cause, as the sense that your life is slightly hollow even when everything looks fine from the outside. As the 2 a.m. thought that cuts through everything else and reminds you there's something you haven't faced yet. Here's what the wisdom traditions understood, and what we are only now beginning to verify scientifically. The thing you're running from isn't as dangerous as the running. In Buddhism, the concept of dukkha, often translated as suffering, is more precisely understood as this persistent, low-grade friction that comes from resisting what is, not from pain itself, but from the constant effort to escape it. The teaching isn't that pain doesn't exist, it's that the avoidance creates more suffering than the original wound. The Sufi tradition takes this further. The concept of the nafs, the lower self, the ego self, describes a kind of psychic architecture built almost entirely around self-protection and avoidance. The path of refinement in that tradition is not a path of adding virtues. It's a path of dissolution, of letting the layers fall away, not by attacking them, but by ceasing to feed them. And what starves the nafs? What dissolves the layers? Stillness, silence, the willingness to sit with what arises instead of immediately reaching for something to make it stop. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, Stoic philosopher, a man with arguably more demands on his attention than anyone alive, wrote his meditations as a private document, not for publication, for himself, a daily practice of returning to what was real, stripping away distraction, confronting the self without decoration. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." 3 words, written 2,000 years ago, more radical now than they were then. Because to confine yourself to the present, genuinely, not as a wellness slogan, you have to stop the noise. The noise is almost entirely made of past and future, regret and anticipation, memory and projection. The present moment, stripped of those overlays, is almost always quiet, almost always, surprisingly, fine. And here's the thing that changes when you sit with this long enough. The grief that was waiting, it moves through. Not because you forced it, but because you finally gave it space. The question you were avoiding, it answers itself, or reveals that it was never as dangerous as the avoidance. The gap between who you are and who you could be, it becomes navigable, not overnight, not without discomfort, but it becomes navigable. The noise was never protecting you from your problems, it was preserving them. So what do we do with this? Not how do we eliminate noise from our lives. That's not realistic, and it's not the point. Noise has its place. Music is real. Connection is real. The problem isn't sound, it's the unconscious, compulsive reaching for it every time the quiet appears. The shift is simple to describe and genuinely difficult to practice. Begin to notice the gap between stimulus and response. The moment the quiet appears and the hand moves toward the phone, that gap. Even a second of awareness in that gap changes something. Not because awareness is magic, because awareness reveals choice, and most of us, most of the time, aren't choosing the noise. We're just reacting to the discomfort of its absence. The traditions offer different practices for widening that gap. The Buddhist sits and watches the arising of impulse without acting on it. The Stoic journals, asking what is in my control, what is not, what is this impulse actually serving? The Sufi practices dhikr, repetitive remembrance, as a way of redirecting the mind's craving for stimulation towards something deeper. But underneath all of them is the same recognition. The signal you're looking for in the noise, the connection, the meaning, the sense of aliveness, is more available in the quiet than anywhere else. You've just been looking in the wrong direction. Silence isn't the absence of signal, it is the signal. The noise is the interference. I want to be honest with you about something. This isn't a comfortable video to sit with, because if it's landed, you're now more aware of something you were doing without noticing it. And awareness without change can feel worse than comfortable ignorance. But that discomfort is not a problem. That discomfort is the beginning. The addiction to noise is not a character flaw. It's a response to a world that profits from your distraction and a nervous system that was never designed for this level of stimulation. You didn't choose this, but you can begin to unchoose it. Not all at once, not perfectly, one gap at a time. One moment where you notice the pull and don't follow it immediately. One moment where the quiet is allowed to be quiet. And in that moment, in that small act of staying, something begins to change. Not because you forced it, because you finally stopped preventing it. The signal was always there, you just had it turned up too loud to hear it. This is video 2 in the silence series. If you haven't seen video 1 yet, what silence does to you when you stop fighting it, I'd start there. It's the soul of this series and everything else builds from it. Video 3 is where we go deeper into the traditions, the ancient technologies of silence that have been refined over millennia. And video 4 closes the arc with what actually becomes possible on the other side of all this. If this video stirred something, even something uncomfortable, drop it in the comments. That's the conversation I'm here to have. I'll see you in the silence.